All right, guys, welcome to lesson 8.4. We're going to practice evaluating some exponential functions today. Most part, this is really just a review of some basic math skills, but they are things that students struggle with, so it's worth reviewing. So we're going to have a couple slides where we review some basic skills here. So let's talk about adding and subtracting fractions. So whenever you're adding and subtracting fractions, you want to get a common denominator. Now the first thing that I notice is that this is a fraction and this is a fraction, but the other one is not. So I'm going to make it a fraction by putting it over 1. The next thing I want to do is I want to get all these to have the same denominator, so I need to find the common denominator. The smallest number that can be divided by all three of these is 20, so I want my common denominator to be 20. So I'd multiply this one by 5 in order to get it to equal 20. And whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. For this one, I need to multiply by 4 to make the bottom equal 20. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. Same thing over here. We're going to multiply by 20 to make the denominator equal 20. As a result, I end up with 15 over 20 plus 8 over 20 minus 20 over 20. After that, you just combine the numerators. 15 and 8 is 23. Take away 20 is 3. And so my final answer would be 3 over 20. All right, so I know you guys probably know all that. We're going to be doing it today, though, so just want to make sure it's fresh in our mind and ready to go. Let's take a look at another one here. Multiplying. Pretty sure this won't be a problem for most of you guys either. So just when it comes to multiplying fractions, just do straight across. 3 times 6 is 18. 4 times 5 is 20. And of course, when and where possible, you should always reduce. So 2 goes into the top 9 times, and 2 goes into the bottom 10 times. So final answer there would be 9/10. So multiplying fractions is another skill you're going to want to know today. This is the slide that I'm particularly concerned about for you guys, just because I know that sometimes we struggle with things like negative exponents and fraction exponents and whatnot. So this is the part you're really going to want to make sure that you pay close attention to. So 3/5 to the second power. So basically you're going to apply that power to the numerator and to the denominator. And so that's going to end up being 9/25. Okay. Now, when it comes to negative exponents, they do essentially the same thing as the positives, but they flip it at the same time. So you can kind of think of this as happening in two steps. The first step is, let's go ahead and make the power positive, and we're allowed to do that so long as we flip the fraction over. That's what the negative does. So if you apply the negative to the fraction, it flips it over and it makes it a reciprocal. After that, then you're going to go ahead and handle it the same way we did the last one, which is just square the top and bottom. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next one here. 3 to the power of -4. Well, same thing, but you can't flip a number over, right? Or can you? You can if you think of it as a fraction. So I'm going to think of 3 as 3 over 1, and therefore if I apply the negative to that fraction, it's going to flip it over. And therefore, when I apply the power, I get 1 to the 4th power over 3 to the 4th power, which is 1 over 81. Okay? So that's how you handle negative exponents with fractions and stuff like that. But what happens when your power itself is a fraction? Well, we talked about that a little while ago. We had a rule where we said if you have a base number that's being raised to a power, where you have a fraction, t over b, when you rewrite it, the denominator of that fraction power becomes the root of, and the top number of the fraction power just stays as a power like that. And that's how we're going to be handling these guys. So for instance, on part D, I would start by rewriting this. This is really a third root of 8 being squared. Now, if you don't remember how to do cube roots, basically that means that you're going to break this number down. And for every group of 3, you can take that number out. So I've got a group of 3, 2, so I could take a 2 out and cross off everything on the inside. And since there's nothing left on the inside, I just have 2 there. And 2 squared is 4. Okay? So there's that. Now, this one is going to be pretty much the same thing, but it is negative on the power, right? And we've talked about that already. So let's go ahead and see how to deal with that. The first thing I might do is let's go ahead and apply the negative there. So if you do that, you're going to get 1/8. Then you're going to apply the power to the top and the bottom. Now we just got through doing 8 to the 2/3 on the last problem, and we ended up with 4, right? So the bottom just becomes 4. And we could do the same thing with the 1. We could work it out, but I'll ruin the surprise for you. Anytime you raise 1 to any power, it's just going to be 1. So my final answer is 1/4. You may notice that this is the same answer that we got in part D. It's just that instead of being 4, it's 1/4 now, and that's because it's a negative power. So another way we could have handled this, which I think honestly is easier, but I wanted to stick to the same process I was doing before with these other ones over here, is instead of applying the negative first and causing it to become 1/8, instead of doing it this way, it might be easier actually to go ahead and just ignore the negative and solve it like this first, and at the very end, after you get your answer, flip it over. But it doesn't matter how you do it. Answer comes out to be 1/4. The last thing I'll go over with you guys is the fact that any number to the 0 power is 1. And that's not obvious. I think a lot of us, whenever we see that, we're really tempted to say it equals 0, but it does not. It equals 1. Because it's not 5 times 0. It's 5 to the 0 power. So try not to get those things mixed up. All right. So those are some basic skills review that you're going to need for today. Before we begin the actual lesson that we're going to work on, I want to give you guys a chance to practice all those. So now you don't have to do all of these. Just do the ones that you feel that you need to. I'm assuming that in particular, you guys really should take a minute and practice these. Whether or not you do 1 and 2, I would say I'm sure that most of you know how to do that okay. But I'm putting it on there just in case. But for 3 through 6, I would encourage everybody to try those because those are things where a lot of us struggle still. So pause the video here, and when you pause it, I'll have the solutions up for all of them. So here's our answers there. I'll give you a minute to check them, and then we're going to go ahead and move on to our next part here. All right, so this is the kind of stuff I'm actually going to be asking you guys about today, but all those skills that we just reviewed will come in handy as we do them. So I'm going to be giving you a function and then asking you to evaluate that function at various values of x. So for instance, for a, I'm asking you to plug 2 in for x and to solve. So let's go ahead and do that. F of 2 then would be 2 times 9 to the 2nd power plus 4. So I'm replacing the x with 2. You got to remember to do your order of operations. So powers are first. That would be 81. Multiplication comes next. 2 times 81 is 162. Adding 4 to that, we get 166. So that's the answer to part A. Let's take a look at part B. F of 0, that means I'm going to be plugging 0 in. All right, once again, powers are first, so 9 to the 0 power is 1. Any number to the 0 power equals 1. And then multiplication is next, followed by addition. So final answer there is 6. Let's go ahead and take a look at letter C. We want to find out what f of negative 1 is. Powers are first. Now that's going to take a little bit of thought here. So first of all, notice that we've got a negative exponent on our hands. The negative is going to cause that 9 to become 1/9. It flips it over. It makes it a reciprocal. After that, you can apply the power, but since it's only a 1, it's not going to change anything. It's still going to be just 1/9. Okay? Then we can do our multiplication. So think of this 2 in the front as 2 over 1, and when you multiply fractions, it's just top times top and bottom times bottom. So I've got 2/9 plus 4, and now we have to add fractions together. So we're going to need to create a common denominator. So I'm going to think of that as 2/9 plus 4 over 1, and the common denominator here would be 9. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by 9. And that means I'm going to have 2/9 plus 36 over 9, which ends up being 38 over 9. Okay? So just taking those basic skills that we reviewed a second ago and making sure that we use all those accurately as we just carry out the order of operations. Let's do one more. We're going to do f of 1/2 So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do our exponent, right? 9 to the 1/2 power. So when we do that, it's going to be the second root of 9, and the power of 1 goes out there. All right, so this is just a regular old square root whenever it's a 2 there. So what's the square root of 9? Well, that would be 3. And 3 to the first power is just 3, so we could leave it like that. And that ends up being 6 plus 4, which is 10. All right, so a couple of different exponent rules there. Let's throw a couple of those at you guys. Go ahead and pause the video there and give these 4 a try. When you unpause it, I'll have the solutions available for you. All right, and so here's the answers to those ones. We'll go ahead and do another one. This one, the next one's example set is just going to have some more fractions and a little bit more challenging type of situations on hand. So let's go ahead and do this one example too. Here we go. So first we're going to do part A. We're going to plug in 1. Now 1/8 to the first power is just going to be 1/8. Then we multiply the fractions, doing top times top and bottom times bottom. And then we're ready to get that common denominator. So if I think of this as 4 over 1, I'd multiply the top and bottom by actually 16, pretty big. That's going to end up being 64 over 16. And as a result, we end up with 63 over 16. Final answer for number 1. Let's go ahead and take a look at part B. We have h of negative 1. Plugging in negative 1 there. All right, so applying the negative to this, it's going to flip it over so that it becomes 8 over 1. And it's a first power, so we really don't need the power there at all. So we're ready to go ahead and just multiply straight across. We get negative 8 over 2. And negative 8 over 2 is 4. Well, negative 4. And negative 4 plus 4 is 0. So that one would be 0. Let's go ahead and take a look at part C. We got 1/3 now. So we have a negative 1/2 times 1/8 to the 1/3 power plus 4. All right, so taking care of our exponents first, of course, like usual. We're going to be looking for the cube root of 8 raised to the first power. We already found the cube root earlier in this lesson. The cube root of 8 is 2. 2 to the first power is 2. So we really don't need the power there at all. We'll just kind of get rid of that. Multiplying 2 over 1 times negative 1/2, we end up with negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1 plus 4, which is 3. Final answer there. Let's go ahead and take a look at the last one there, part D. And find out what h of negative 1/3 is. So it's kind of the same thing, but it's negative this time. Okay, so I'm going to apply the negative here first. And if I apply the negative, it ends up being 8 over 1, which is really just 8, so I'm going to leave it as 8 if you don't mind. Then I'm going to find the 1/3 root of 8. I'm sorry, 1/3 power, which means I'm going to change it into a root. A third root of 8, which once again we already know is 4. And I'm sorry, it's not 4 at all, is it? It's 2. The third root of 8 is 2. And then negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. And we end up with 0. All right. All right, let's go ahead and have you guys do some practices with some slightly more challenging equations here. So go ahead and pause the video here, give these a try. When you unpause it, I will have the answers displayed for you. All right, guys, so these are the answers that you should have gotten for those ones. And that'll close us out for the day. So we'll see you guys in class to get a little more practice with these. Have a good one.